There's been lots of talk online about Bugatti service, repair and maintenance costs recently online, and most of what you hear is simply not true.
A wrecked Bugatti, a YouTube video, and now a lawsuit that could change everything for the man who repaired what others refused to touch. Matt Armstrong built his reputation by restoring cars manufacturers had written off. With no factory support or official parts, he relied on skill, patience, and determination while documenting every step. Many praised his work as remarkable, but everything changed when Alex G., once a trusted supporter, turned against him. Their public fallout has raised serious questions. What really happened between them? The million-dollar gamble. A wrecked hypercar is not supposed to have a second chapter. Insurance pays out, the wreck gets parted out, and the story ends quietly in a salvage yard. But one Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport refused to follow that script, and the man who bought it back broke every rule about what happens after a crash. Only 60 samples of the Chiron Pur Sport were ever built. Each one left a single factory in Molsheim, France, shaped by aerospace-level engineering and hand finishing that took months per car. Buyers paid close to $4 million without hesitation. Losing one is rare enough to shake the entire hypercar world, and watching one land on a wrecking site feels like watching royalty fall. The driver behind the wheel that day was Alex Gonzalez, a 25-year-old day trader from Miami known online as FXLexG. He built a following through blunt, high-energy trading content, turning himself into one of the most recognizable young faces in that world. Off-camera, he had just become the youngest owner ever recorded of a Bugatti this expensive, a milestone that made headlines before the crash happened. During a filmed stunt, Gonzalez lost control and struck an obstacle head-on. The impact was severe enough to trigger every safety system in the car at once. Airbags deployed instantly, and the front structure took the full brunt of the collision, crumpling in a way engineers never intended for a car built almost entirely from carbon fiber. The horseshoe grille, one of Bugatti's most recognizable design signatures, was shattered beyond recognition. Deeper damage reached the transmission, a component so specialized that Bugatti dispatched a technician directly from France just to inspect it in person. What that technician found led to a repair estimate that stopped everyone in their tracks. The number came back at $1.7 million just to bring the car back to working order. That figure reportedly represented a steep reduction, nearly 70% below what parts and labor would normally cost for damage this extensive. Even when discounted, it was enough for insurers to write the car off completely and issue a salvage title. Most owners would take the payout and disappear from the story. Gonzalez did the opposite. He collected his insurance money, then returned to the same auction platform where his wrecked Chiron had landed and placed a bid on his own totaled car. He won it back for roughly $1.6 million, a number that rose to $1.9 million once other fees were added. On paper, it looked reckless. In reality, the math told a different story. Even in a severely damaged state, a Chiron Pur Sport retains a base structure and pedigree worth $4 to $4.5 million intact. If someone could genuinely rebuild it, the numbers still worked heavily in Gonzalez's favor. Everything depended on finding that someone. That search led straight to Matt Armstrong, a builder known for taking on wrecks that manufacturer specialists had already declared unfixable. His most famous rebuild, a Lamborghini Revuelto, went from a mangled shell to a fully restored machine after roughly 425 pounds in parts, labor, and reassembly. His YouTube channel documents these builds in raw detail, drawing millions of viewers who watch every torn-apart panel get reassembled piece by piece. Gonzalez had quietly considered reaching out to Armstrong for weeks before finally making contact. Once the offer was made, Armstrong flew from the United Kingdom to Miami to inspect the Chiron in person. A make-or-break evaluation. Nothing about the visit went smoothly from the start. En route to the workshop, a Chevrolet cut across oncoming traffic and slammed into a Ferrari being driven by one of Armstrong's own team members. A second high-value wreck had now entered the story before a single tool touched the Bugatti. For anyone inclined to read signs, the timing felt impossible to ignore. Then Bugatti stepped back into the picture, and their next move changed the entire direction of the project in a way nobody involved had anticipated. Locked out. The fight for control. The rebuild had barely started when Bugatti sent a message that had nothing to do with parts or pricing. It was a message about control. The moment Matt Armstrong took possession of the Veyron, the manufacturer moved to shut the entire project down before a single wrench turned. Bugatti locked the vehicle identification number tied to the car. In practical terms, that single action meant no authorized dealer anywhere in the world could legally sell a component for that specific chassis. Headlights, bolts, seals, brackets, cables, every small piece needed for a proper rebuild became instantly unavailable through any official channel Armstrong could access. This was not a clerical mistake or an oversight in the paperwork. It was a calculated move by the company. Bugatti's stated position was that the car belonged back at their own factory for repair, and locking the VIN was the mechanism they used to force that outcome onto Gonzalez and Armstrong. Consider the position this put Armstrong in. He had committed to rebuilding one of the most technically demanding production vehicles ever manufactured, and now the only company with official access to its components had cut him off entirely. Every legitimate path to sourcing parts had closed before he had done a single work on the car. Gonzalez responded the way he responds to most things, publicly and without holding back. He issued an open challenge online, giving Bugatti roughly 24 hours to unlock the car, or he would begin producing replacement parts himself using a 3D printer. That kind of statement put a company like Bugatti in a tight position with no easy exit. Ignoring the challenge risked watching a popular content creator broadcast himself replacing precision-engineered transmission components with printed substitutes. Responding meant engaging directly with a situation the company likely wanted to avoid altogether. What happened next surprised almost everyone following the story closely. Mate Rimac, the chief executive overseeing Bugatti, reached out to Gonzalez directly through a private message, which Gonzalez then shared publicly. Shortly after, the VIN restriction was lifted. Rimac did not stop there. He went on to record and release his own detailed video addressing the entire situation from the company's perspective. In that video, Rimac worked to correct several claims circulating about Bugatti's repair costs and process. He explained that only 2 facilities anywhere on the planet possessed the specialized equipment required to safely separate the car's rear subframe from its carbon monocoque structure, a step no ordinary workshop could attempt. He described this separation as essential following any crash involving hidden structural damage, since skipping it risked missing internal failures invisible from the outside. Rimac confirmed the gearbox housing had shattered on impact and that the monocoque itself showed clear signs of structural compromise, raising real safety concerns about attempting repairs outside proper facilities. He questioned what could go wrong if this level of damage were addressed incorrectly on a machine engineered to reach speeds far beyond what typical road cars ever approach. Rimac also stated that Bugatti had offered Gonzalez a fair, discounted repair path directly through the factory, an offer he says was ultimately declined. Reading through Rimac's comments, it seemed clear he suspected Gonzalez had chosen the independent route for the same reason behind most of his public decisions, because it generated far more attention and content than a factory repair ever could. Meanwhile, Armstrong's reaction to all of this was completely unguarded. On camera, he called it mental that Bugatti's chief executive was watching his videos closely enough to respond directly to them. However, Armstrong was firm on one point that never wavered. The car was staying in his workshop, not going anywhere near Molsheim. His logic was simple and direct, the kind of reasoning that anyone who has felt small next to a massive institution could relate with. Once a car like this enters the factory system, it rarely comes back out quickly. Every additional issue they uncover adds more cost and more delay, stretching the timeline indefinitely. The real question was never whether Bugatti's own engineers were capable of the repair. The real question was whether Gonzalez would ever see his car again if it disappeared into that process. Armstrong made his decision and committed fully. He would rebuild a factory-locked, parts-restricted Bugatti inside an independent workshop, broadcasting every step to millions of viewers who refused to look away. Interestingly, what came next tested every claim Rimac had made about what was actually possible outside Molsheim's walls. Inside the impossible rebuild. Getting inside the Chiron meant taking on a job that looked impossible from the outside. Armstrong began by removing the airboxes, revealing 14 structural titanium bolts holding the front section of the car to the rear drivetrain frame. One by one, he worked through each bolt, treating every step with the same attention a factory technician would use. Once those bolts came free, Armstrong disconnected the battery, drained the coolant lines, and unplugged the electrical systems running between both halves of the chassis. Slowly, the front tub separated from the rear structure. This was the exact separation Rimac had insisted required specialized factory equipment found in only 2 locations worldwide. What actually made the difference was not a rare machine, but steady hands, and enough patience to work through each connection carefully. Once inside, the extent of the crash damage became fully visible for the first time. The impact had driven the engine forward, crushing a coolant pipe and exposing problems nobody had detected from outside the sealed structure. The component Bugatti had flagged as the true obstacle, a bracket positioned between the engine and gearbox, needed to be recreated with extreme accuracy. Armstrong's team turned to 3D scanning technology, capturing every dimension of the original damaged bracket, before converting that scan into a complete digital model ready for manufacturing. From that digital file, they machined a brand new bracket from a solid block of aluminum, matching the original specifications down to fine tolerances. Any deviation in the positioning of the crank sensors mounted on that bracket would cause serious problems, potentially preventing the engine from starting or causing it to misfire unpredictably once it was running. This level of precision matched exactly what Bugatti claimed only their own facilities could achieve. Yet it happened inside an independent workshop with commercially available tools. During reassembly, one crank sensor seized unexpectedly and refused to rotate far enough to reconnect its plug properly, a complication that typically forces technicians to separate the entire chassis again from scratch. Rather than repeating that lengthy process, Armstrong cut a small, targeted access opening, allowing direct reach to the stuck sensor without full disassembly. That single choice revealed something important about his approach to problems. He consistently looked past the obvious, expected solution and found the option that actually solved the issue efficiently. More unexpected discoveries followed as the rebuild progressed further. The knee airbag system, a component specific to crash safety, turned out to be functionally identical to a standard airbag unit used in the Audi A3, a mainstream production vehicle costing a fraction of the Chiron's price. That airbag component weighed around 50 pounds and fit as a direct compatible replacement, despite sitting inside a car worth well over $4 million. Even more surprising, the accelerator pedal inside this same ultra-exclusive hypercar was made from simple molded plastic, rather than machined aluminum or any exotic aerospace-grade material buyers might reasonably expect. By March, months after the project began, the Chiron's engine turned over and ran successfully for the first time since the crash. Shortly afterward, the car moved forward under its own power, a milestone neither Armstrong's critics nor Bugatti itself had genuinely expected to happen outside factory walls. Thinking about it later on, Armstrong suggested the entire ordeal confirmed something he had suspected from the beginning about manufacturers like Bugatti. Their resistance was never really about whether independent repair was technically achievable, since he had just proven that it clearly was, given the right expertise and patience. Instead, he believed the real concern centered on protecting an image of exclusivity, one that justifies extraordinary repair costs and depends on customers believing only the factory can work on these machines. But the Chiron rebuild, as dramatic as it was, represented only part of a much larger project Armstrong had been developing quietly in parallel. While public attention stayed fixed on the Chiron, Armstrong had also acquired a separate vehicle, a repossessed Bugatti Veyron, the model that came directly before the Chiron in Bugatti's lineup. This Veyron arrived with a long list of serious mechanical complaints attached to its history. It refused to shift into gear properly. The engine misfired intermittently, and a radiator was actively leaking coolant. Wiring connected to the gearbox pump had been damaged so severely by prolonged heat exposure that the protective plastic casing had fallen apart entirely, leaving exposed connections throughout that section of the car. When Armstrong investigated the transmission fault, everyone assumed signaled catastrophic internal failure. What he uncovered instead would completely reshape how people understood Bugatti's reputation for complexity. Bugatti's biggest secret, exposed sourcing parts for the Veyron, brought Armstrong straight back to the same wall he had already hit once before. Bugatti's answer stayed identical to what he heard during the Chiron project, refusing to sell components to anyone operating outside their tightly controlled authorized service network, insisting instead that the vehicle be shipped directly to them for any work. Armstrong later described this policy as a legal structure designed to hand the manufacturer complete control over independent repairs, regardless of an owner's mechanical skill, available resources, or personal willingness to take on the risk themselves. It left no legitimate path forward except surrendering the car entirely to Bugatti's own facilities. This time, though, the Veyron gave Armstrong something the Chiron project never fully delivered: concrete physical proof. As he continued disassembling the car piece by piece, he discovered that a significant number of internal components were not exotic, custom-engineered parts at all, but standard components pulled straight from the broader Volkswagen Group parts catalog. Spark plugs inside the engine matched standard NGK units, the exact same brand and specification found in ordinary Volkswagen and Audi models sold at dealerships everywhere. This made sense once you considered that Bugatti operates under the same parent company responsible for manufacturing Volkswagens, Audis, and Porsches across a shared industrial platform. Accumulator tanks inside the Veyron turned out to be identical to units used in the Volkswagen Lupo, a small economy hatchback sold for a tiny fraction of the Veyron's price. Those same spark plugs cross-referenced directly to parts available at any ordinary auto parts store. No special ordering or manufacturer approval required whatsoever. The heat-damaged gearbox pump, causing so many of the Veyron's original symptoms, turned out to be the exact same component Audi uses to operate the folding roof mechanism inside their A5 convertible model. A part responsible for opening a sunroof was silently doing critical work inside a multi-million-dollar hypercar transmission system. This raised an uncomfortable question worth sitting with for a moment. If components inside a Bugatti trace back to the same supply chains serving mainstream, mid-range European vehicles, what exactly justifies the outrageous cost attached to official Bugatti servicing? Because Bugatti's quoted price for the specific Veyron repair work Armstrong performed sat at roughly $25,000. Armstrong, on the contrary, sourced every part through normal retail channels, paid standard market pricing, and completed the entire repair himself for approximately $1,600 total. The wide gap separating those two numbers had nothing to do with engineering complexity or specialized scientific processes, locked away inside one factory building in France. That gap represented branding value and the manufacturer's ability to control exactly who could legally touch the car or access its parts supply chain. Control itself became the product being sold, and that control created the massive profit margin baked into every official service invoice issued by the company. Armstrong never intended to build a case against the pricing structure of the entire hypercar industry when this project began. His only original goal was fixing a broken car. Yet by documenting every step publicly on camera, he inadvertently created undeniable evidence, challenging one of the industry's most protected and profitable myths. That myth being the idea that Bugatti servicing costs a fortune purely because these machines are so fundamentally unique that no comparison to ordinary vehicles could possibly apply, proving publicly that a legendary multi-million-dollar hypercar shares spark plugs with an affordable hatchback creates serious discomfort for people who profit heavily from maintaining that illusion. That discomfort eventually escalated into legal conflict, and Armstrong now finds himself facing pressure from 3 separate directions at the same time, all connected by the same underlying tension his rebuilds exposed. The first and most personal front involves Alex Gonzalez directly. Once the Chiron rebuild finished, after millions of viewers had followed the entire process from start to finish, the relationship between Armstrong and Gonzalez collapsed entirely behind the scenes. Gonzalez did not stay silent about the breakdown, choosing instead to share his own version of events publicly with his audience. His narrative painted Armstrong not as the skilled problem solver millions had cheered for, but as someone who had wronged him during the process. Serious allegations began circulating, including claims involving deception and exploitation, details that remain actively disputed between both parties as the situation continues developing. Audiences who once fully supported Armstrong throughout the entire rebuild now found themselves caught between 2 conflicting accounts of the same shared experience, forced to weigh loyalty against uncertainty. Meanwhile, the second and third fronts closing in on Armstrong were about to make everything considerably worse. 3 lawsuits, 1 pattern. Years of transparent, honest work in front of a camera built the foundation of trust between Armstrong and his audience. Every rebuild, every torn-apart panel, every problem solved on screen added another layer to a reputation earned slowly over time. Gonzalez's public accusations, whether true or not, struck directly at that carefully built foundation, and lawyers soon entered the picture. Back in April, Armstrong addressed legal threats connected to his projects openly with his viewers, though he stopped short of revealing specific details about their nature or origin. The simple fact that he chose to discuss this publicly, on camera, in front of an audience of millions, signaled that circumstances had moved well beyond casual online disputes or scripted response videos. Something carrying genuine legal consequences had entered the picture. Armstrong described his complicated relationship with Bugatti's chief executive, Mate Rimac, using an unusual comparison, likening it to the dynamic between football legends Messi and Ronaldo, 2 figures who reportedly hold mutual respect privately, even as public opinions amplify tension that may not fully reflect reality. That framing revealed something deliberate about how carefully Armstrong chose his words. If Bugatti was pursuing any form of legal action tied to his content, saying something inflammatory on camera risked becoming evidence used against him later. Every public statement now carried weight beyond simple entertainment value. A third and separate front emerged that connected the entire situation into a much larger pattern, one that most outside observers had not yet linked directly back to Armstrong's ongoing struggles. A Miami-based Bugatti dealership called Bremen filed its own formal lawsuit against the manufacturer, containing allegations that added crucial context to everything happening around the rebuilds. The dealership's complaint claimed it held legal entitlement to fair warranty reimbursement rates under existing Florida franchise protection law. According to the filing, Bugatti initially agreed to honor those reimbursement rates before abruptly withdrawing the arrangement, a move the dealership characterized not as standard business practice, but as punishment for unrelated disagreements. The lawsuit further alleged that Bugatti had been conducting direct sales transactions with certain customers while completely bypassing the dealership, effectively competing against its own authorized franchise partner in the same local market. Veyron also claimed Bugatti threatened to contact local owners directly, informing them warranty service was no longer available through the dealership itself. The dealership interpreted this as an intentional strategy designed to strip away its established customer base entirely. A clear pattern started emerging once these separate conflicts were placed side by side. Controlling parts access, controlling who performs repairs, and controlling who profits from servicing these vehicles appeared central to every dispute connected to the brand. Blocking independent rebuilds, locking vehicle identification numbers, pressuring franchise dealerships financially, and selling directly to customers while dealers absorbed operational risk, all pointed toward the same underlying priority. Armstrong never created this dynamic himself. He simply stepped into the middle of it holding a camera and started documenting what he found along the way. Eventually, he finds himself entangled in a conflict extending far beyond a single car, a single business disagreement, or a single YouTube channel's content calendar. He has become one small piece within a much larger story about who ultimately controls access to objects worth millions of dollars, and what exactly that control is worth to the people who fight to maintain it. Where things currently stand remains genuinely unresolved across every front simultaneously. The legal dispute involving Gonzalez continues actively without clear resolution in sight. The legal threats connected to Bugatti remain real, documented directly by Armstrong's own public statements rather than speculation or rumor from outside sources. The dealership lawsuit continues progressing through the court system on its own separate timeline, adding institutional weight to accusations that individual creators alone might struggle to substantiate. Armstrong remains positioned directly at the center of all three overlapping conflicts, continuing to film new content, continuing to post updates, continuing to operate the very channel that started this entire chain of events in the first place. So how will it all end? The end of the road. Consider the tightrope Armstrong now walks every single day. His entire business model was constructed around openness, showing every mistake, every fix, and every decision directly to his audience, without filtering the messy parts out. The instant he starts hiding steps or softening details, he loses the exact quality that earned viewer trust in the first place. Yet speaking too freely on camera now carries genuine risk, since one careless comment could seriously undermine his legal standing in ways no amount of viewership could ever repair. Armstrong finds himself holding something that is both valuable and dangerous, information that cannot simply be taken back once it has already reached millions of screens worldwide. The Veyron footage stands at the center of this tension, documenting precisely where Volkswagen Group components appeared inside the car, exactly how those parts cross-reference to mainstream vehicles, and precisely how large the gap ran between official Bugatti pricing and real-world repair costs. That footage already exists publicly and cannot be erased from public memory now. Millions of viewers have already watched it, and that knowledge poses an intense question the hypercar industry has no clean way to answer convincingly. If the components are standard parts and skilled independent technicians can perform the labor successfully, and the finished vehicle performs identically afterward, then the actual value being protected by premium pricing becomes genuinely unclear. That premium clearly is not protecting owners from receiving inferior replacement parts, since the parts themselves proved identical to standard automotive components. It is also not protecting owners from incompetent repair work, since Armstrong's rebuild functioned exactly as intended once completed. What remains appears to be protection of the manufacturer's exclusive authority to determine repair pricing indefinitely. This question extends well beyond Bugatti alone, applying equally to nearly every manufacturer occupying the highest tier of the automotive market. That question now travels alongside a YouTube channel commanding tens of millions of cumulative views, ensuring it reaches an audience far larger than industry insiders alone would typically see. Being direct about Armstrong himself matters here, since this story deserves honest treatment rather than blind cheerleading. He is not without flaws, and no creator operating at this scale of public visibility avoids generating friction along the way. Some portion of what Gonzalez has claimed publicly may prove accurate, while other portions may not hold up under scrutiny. Nobody outside the situation currently knows the complete truth, and anyone claiming certainty at this stage is simply guessing without real evidence. What remains verifiable, however, carries its own significant weight regardless of how the personal dispute eventually resolves. The rebuild genuinely happened from start to finish, and the car runs under its own power today. Footage from the Veyron project remains real and unaltered, showing actual cross-referenced components matching standard Volkswagen Group parts precisely as documented. The $3 fuse that solved a supposedly catastrophic transmission failure was completely real, verified on camera in front of a massive audience without staging or exaggeration involved. The financial gap separating a $25,000 official quote from a $1,600 independent repair is still mathematically undeniable, despite any ongoing disputes. Separately, the dealership lawsuit filed independently by Bremen, with no coordination or connection to Armstrong's channel whatsoever, tells a strikingly similar underlying story about industry control. A consistent pattern runs directly through every thread connected to this situation, involving control, restriction, and determining precisely who gets permitted contact with these vehicles and who profits from that limited access. This pattern surfaces clearly within the VIN locking policy, within the restrictive parts distribution system, and within allegations made by the dealership itself. It surfaces again within legal pressure currently being applied against someone whose only real action was filming himself repairing a car honestly and sharing what he discovered along the way. Whether Armstrong emerges from this legal tangle without lasting consequences, or whether some accusations against him eventually prove substantial, remains undetermined as events continue unfolding. Legal proceedings follow their own pace, refusing to move faster in spite of public pressure or growing attention surrounding the case. But the broader story, Armstrong unintentionally exposed to public view, has already spread too far to contain or withdraw at this point. The car moved under its own power, proving the impossible was achievable all along. That single fact changed something permanently within an industry built carefully on maintaining exclusivity and mystery around repair costs. Now, the people and institutions who depended on that mystery remaining intact are responding exactly as powerful interests typically respond when something they relied upon suddenly slips beyond their grasp entirely. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.